Everybody, welcome back to the show. Alan, how's it going, man? What's new with you?
Hey man, it's been a great week. We got episode 1 live, got some really fun feedback from family and friends. It was great to see them reaching out and supporting us. Don, everyone really learned a lot from you in episode 1, which was crazy.
Appreciate that. Yeah, appreciate everybody sending in all the feedback. I announced it on my email list and I shared the feedback with you, Alan. There was a bunch of people who replied of things that they would like to see. They're excited to listen. We've had people send in, photos of them listening to it in their car, people listening to it in their house, their garage gym, on YouTube. So thank you to everybody that's doing that. That's really cool. Glad to hear that you're listening. We've got a bunch of cool stuff happening soon. So what kind of stuff have you been working on anything recently at all or what?
Every night I set up on my computer and I just try to build something now. It's just been, instead of sitting down on the couch and playing a game or watching a TV show, I'll just pull out my laptop and try to make something fun. And my friends who are watching this are not too happy with me at the moment. I've been building and sort of live testing in our group chat some really fun group chat bots, which we could talk about later.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm working on similar. I think it was yesterday. I was like 17 hours. I was at my desk. Like I forget at what point it was like 11 in the morning. I was still hungry. I hadn't eaten yet. And I was like, I got to eat soon. And then before I know it, I look up, it's 12:25. I'm like, I still haven't eaten. Like I'm just inside of the code, almost like an addict, like just like tapping my elbow, like one more prompt, just one more prompt. And I just like kept going.
And
I couldn't
the
stop.
worst is when it just when you hit a failure and you just can't end the night on the failure. It's
Oh no.
just like I have to finish this. And then whatever, man, it ends when the rabbit hole ends, when you finally get the result that you want. That happened to me last night, actually. And yeah, I got to say, you know that John Hamm meme where he's like dancing in the club,
Yeah.
it's the one that's going. That's how I felt when I finally wrapped it up and I got what I needed. So that was a great feeling.
One of the things that I actually do that's a little bit different than that is I will, if I'm working a long time, I have found a trick for myself, and I don't know if it works this way for others, is that I will actually end on an error. And so then if I get stuck, I get an error, that means I have something to do. So then at that point, I'm like, all right, I have an error message on my screen. It's late at night. I got to end the day. I'll end it. And what that means is when I come in the next day, I look down, I'm like, oh yeah, I got this error. And then I feel like I'm just thrust right back into it. So for me,
Yeah,
sometimes that works pretty well. However, it can backfire because then you can be up all night thinking about it.
I know my personality, and that's exactly what's going to happen. I'll be sitting in bed and I'll have to get out of bed and go fix it. I can't go to sleep with that on my mind. So, what did you want to talk about today?
We had been chatting on and off for a long time now regarding AI and just how to get going with it. And there's a fundamental principle that's underpins all that, and that's prompting. And that kind of just goes back to what I was saying. Like it's just like you're just feeding in the prompt. I feel like I can't prompt enough, but learning how to prompt is kind of a core skill. Today we're going to talk about prompting, and what I want to say here is that today's show, the goal is to have you, the listener, the watcher, whoever you are, leave with something that's going to really change the way in which you work with LLMs. And I really feel like you're going to get that because if you learn how to prompt properly or differently, your entire outlook on everything will change. So that's my guarantee to you is that you will actually get something deep out of this show here. That's what we're going to be talking about. We'll be going from basic to advanced inside of prompting here. So we'll just kind of hop right into the show immediately. Here's a quick outline of what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about why prompting matters. We'll kind of talk about the origins of where some of the prompts started from. And then we're going to actually get into the meat and potatoes of today's show. And that's where we're going to talk about the different types of prompts, from simple prompts, which we've all done, to a little more functional prompts. And then we're going to get into fully engineered prompts and kind of what those mean, break them down into their components. We're going to understand throughout the show of like when you should be using each prompt, and you'll kind of just get that sentiment throughout the show. Now, there are a few things that we're not going to cover. We're not going to get super academic. If you go visit various sites, which I will link or we will link in the show notes, there's one site, for example, called promptingguide.ai. And inside of that has all different types of prompts like one shot, few shot, chain of thought. And there's a whole bunch of academic style prompts in there. And I think academia is great in that regard because it helps us learn, but I'm much more of an applied person and I will test to see what works for me. So we will not be talking about those. However, you can go learn about them after the show and they will make a lot more sense. We'll also be talking about the key components of a good prompt. We'll be giving you some examples of some prompts at the end or tools we have used to help create prompts and save them. And then we're going to get a little bit advanced at the end and we'll talk about meta prompting, how you can use agents to help you write your prompts a little bit better. And then, of course, we'll have some sample prompts of how we have used meta agents and some of the meta agents we have used. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about today, Alan.
Yeah, prompting has changed the way that I work with LLMs. And prior to using prompts, I was using it basically as a search engine, which most people who
Yeah,
are starting to use a chat GPT might just show up and ask a simple question. But the act of entering a few lines to prompt the LLM with an instruction before you ask a question, that's the difference between getting slop and getting what you want. So
absolutely.
basically, and it goes both ways. A bad prompt won't get good results. So you need to think through how you want to work through the LLM to structure the question to get the exact results that you want to get.
Mhm.
And this can be done across every single LLM. So whether you're using ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, Grok, when you go to ask a question, you'll want to set up certain criteria within a prompt to let it know, hey, when I ask you about the weather, I'm not just asking what's the temperature outside of my area. I want to know how I should dress today. I want to know, is it going to rain in the afternoon? Should I bring an umbrella? So your prompt may include instructions about how you want it to answer a question when you ask a simple question like, what is the weather? And then forever in that conversation, that prompt lives. And so that when you come back to the conversation and you ask that question, it'll have the instruction of how you prefer it to be answered. And this
Mhm.
is all customizable. I think that's the great thing about working, in your own environment with an LLM, is that you can customize how you prefer to work with it and how you prefer to get your answers. And everyone's structure is different.
Yeah, that's that last component that you said there of everyone's structure is different is very important because some of the things that we're going to prescribe in today's show, I recommend that you try them how we have put them out there. And then I want you to actually change them to see what works for you. You may word something a little bit different. You may use it for coding. You may use it for generating a document or an image or a video. And each one of these prompts is going to be different based upon the style and how you want to use it. So definitely realize this is not a prescription that you have to stick to. This is more of a kind of like education and learning of like, hey, here's how you go from step one to step three, which is going to get you a little more advanced and so forth. Okay.
Yeah. So let's dive into the origins of prompting.
Yeah, for sure. But where did all this come from? And you mentioned before, and I think it was spot on, is like this kind of came from search engines because as humans, we have a certain propensity to repeat past patterns in new environments to see how things are going to react. And so that's kind of what we've done is we've taken like our search engine terminology and said, hey, when did some particular event take place and who are the key figures? Maybe you're asking about history. Same thing you could plug into a search engine, you plug into ChatGPT, and I'm sure a lot of you listening have done exactly this. I know I have. For example, when I was first getting going with the LLMs, I started just asking random questions because I didn't know how to use it. The prompts that we've all kind of started with have either been very simple, like one or two sentences. They're always simple and rudimentary. But using this, there's nothing wrong with these simple queries. I think the important thing to understand here is if you are prompting an LLM and getting value out of it, then your prompt is good enough. But there are ways to improve it because remember, the LLM is super powerful. It has so much intelligence in it. And it's like driving a Ferrari to the grocery store. I can drive a Ferrari to the grocery store. I can get groceries, but there's so much more that Ferrari can go do, if that makes any sense.
You're probably better off taking a truck. You fit more groceries in it. Doesn't make sense.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's a good example. It's a great example, actually. Ferrari to the
Exactly.
grocery store.
Yeah. So we basically use them as glorified search engines, in my opinion. Right? Did you start prompting the same way, like using that search engine thing, or was it similar to this? Or what did you do? How did you get started in it? What was your first endeavor?
Well, when I saw this question, I actually sat and thought about it because it wasn't with an LLM like ChatGPT. Thinking back to how I got my first prompting experience, it was actually through Midjourney.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Creating images.
Midjourney is where you can go and you can create images, generative AI images by giving it instructions. And when you go into Midjourney, you can type in there, all right, I want a picture of like a sailboat on the ocean. And it'll just spit out whatever it thinks. It'll just put together an image to say, all right, here's a sailboat on the ocean. But you can give Midjourney instructions to say, all right, well, I want it to have HDR imagery. I want it to be shot with an RE lens. I want it to look dramatic and dark. I
Mhm.
want the ocean to be bubbling with heat. You could
Yeah.
add anything to the prompt to get the image that you want, and then you can further refine it. So that's where I first got my prompting knowledge from. And to be honest, that didn't necessarily translate from using that platform to ChatGPT. I didn't actually think about I can still use all of these describers to ChatGPT to get a better result. I was still using it like Google, which most people probably are. Recently, I would say over the last maybe 10 years. I don't know exactly when, but it used to be like you could just search on Google like one or two words, but
Mhm.
now you can search full questions. And so that got us used to talking to a computer in that way and say, "Hey, where can I get the best sandwich in my local area?" And so you go to ChatGPT and you ask a similar question. But now when you ask that question, you say something like, "Hey, I can only eat non-gluten sandwiches. I don't want to drive with more than 2.5 miles from my house. I live in XYZ, New Jersey. And, who has the best sandwich for me today?" So that would be an example of a prompt there. So yeah, that was my beginning of using prompts in an LLM, and it's definitely evolved way past that at this point. We're using way more advanced prompts to do way bigger tasks.
Okay, so let's hop into the different types of prompts that we have out there. The first one we're going to talk about is just a simple prompt. So we're not going to spend too much time on this one because these are the ones that we're kind of just referencing already. And again, I just want to reiterate this. Each prompt style that we talk about today does have validity and usefulness. We're not saying that you can't use simple prompts. We're just saying that there's different levels of this game. And so the simple and rudimentary prompts, a couple of examples would be something like, hey, write a document about XYZ topic. Or what's the best material to keep you warm and yet not sweaty while snowboarding? Or, hey, my foot hurts on the bottom near the heel. How do I fix it? Like these are all prompts that I have maybe even typed in majority of these at some point in time because my foot does hurt sometimes. But anyway, they're all very useful and I still use many like that. Alan, have you used prompts like this before? I think you kind of mentioned you did a little bit or what?
Yeah, I do that too sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody does it, so it's all good. And then we've got different, like, as I'm going to go into the developer perspective here. Developers will start to use LLMs very similarly because they'll open up their development environment, which could be something like VS Code or Cursor or whatever they're using, or even a general purpose LLM. And when I say general purpose LLM, I mean ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini, which you just go to the web browser or the app and use it. But a developer might say something very simple. And this is a very simple developer prompt like, hey, create a Python function that parses a CSV file. Like, okay, cool. Or tell me how to configure my DNS for Cloudflare. Now, some of this may be completely Greek to some of your listeners. That's fine. I'm just giving you an example. And then there's even simple things like we might find some code as engineers and not really understand what it does. And we'll say, hey, can you explain this code to me? And we'll paste it in. So again, these are useful and that is okay. And I still use some of these, especially like, hey, explain this code to me. But we'll get into the next level here pretty soon where we can expand on this and make them a little bit more useful in general. So, Alan, when you started, like for me, let me reiterate, for when I started developing with some of the agents, I found myself kind of just having almost like short little sentences like this. Hey, can you build this thing or build this thing? And like very small, like I didn't give it long sentences. When you started working with Gemini and building software with it, or even just generating things, were you giving it huge prompts or were you giving it kind of like one little thing and then it would apply and then the next thing, or how were you doing it? Was it similar to me?
Yeah, I was giving it definitely shorter prompts than I'm giving it right now.
Yeah.
Now I have sort of a global set of instructions for a project, and I'll go to my project and I'll start a conversation. I'll ask about a specific feature or something that I want to add to the app that I'm working on. But previous to that, it was just one window and just basically one shot prompting the entire way through to try and get a result. And that definitely was not the best way to work with the LLM to build something. But it was a good way to get started. I'm trying to actually think through how I actually got started building the app. I explained it in the first episode pretty well, where I said like, hey, I have this issue that I want to solve. Can you help me build something? And LLM came up with a plan, basically like a product requirements document for what it is that I wanted to build. But it didn't take a really complex prompt to do that. And the reason it didn't require one is because I don't think that I had the full vision of what I wanted to build when I first started.
Yeah.
And I started to build that app through collaboration. And as it started to come
Like
together,
with the agent?
like with the agent. But as the app started to come together, I started to say, all right, well, I think it would be better if it had this, this, and that. And so Uh, I would just ask it more questions, how to do something like, let's add this new feature for the music app specifically. It was really important that it didn't just add the links. Like I really wanted it to create a playlist because I wanted people to just have a one button click to all the music that their friends shared in chat. And so
You're just like going back
again,
and forth with it, really, right?
yeah, I was just going back and forth with it. And that's probably, the best way to work with LLMs for me is just as a collaborator. By the way, as somebody who's starting to build my first couple of apps, I don't have a very clear picture of what the end result is going to be. I don't think anybody does when they're building software, but uh, yeah, I just focus on one very simple thing to start it and then
Yeah,
just
that
go
makes
back
sense.
and forth to build.
Yeah, because then you don't really know what you're doing, and you're like, "Hey, I wanna build this one little feature over here," and it builds it, and then you take a look at it, and you're like, "Oh, hey, that's actually I don't want that button over there. I want that button down here, or I don't even want a button there. It's supposed to do that automatically," and then you're kinda learning how to communicate with the agent. So it's very much like we're saying here, it's very simple prompts back and forth, so definitely seems like you've had that same experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, cool. So that kind of wraps us up with the simple prompts, which is like just the very basic stuff. And again, this is again to reiterate for numerous times now, it's okay that if this is how you operate and you build software, because I think a lot of people build things like this in Cursor or whatever app you're using, or even just inside of a general chat GPT instance where you're learning about a document or learning about some type of topic. But next up, you kind of get to like a level two, like how do you advance past that first simple prompt? And after that, we kind of get into something that, and these are not names that are out in the industry. I just call it like a functional prompt because it actually provides a lot of function to you more than what the previous simple prompt would have. And so that is really better than just a single sentence request, though it still can be if it just has some more context. In short, the functional prompt means that you're giving the LLM a little more direction. It might have a few constraints or like clarifications inside of it, but you're not really designing something like a full executable prompt engineered thing that's got all these constraints and stuff that we'll get to. It's mainly still a kind of unstructured, but there's just more direction and intentionality built into what the input of the prompt might be and what it should be. So let's go ahead and talk about some examples. I'll dive into the first one, and then I know you've got one about that you will kind of expand on the snowboarding one that we had talked about before. The first one that I had said, I'm going to build on the previous simple examples. So, before we had talked about, hey, in a simple prompt, I would say, hey, I want to write a document about XYZ topic. And if I were to turn that into more of a functional type of prompt, it might look something like this. And so I'm reading here from my notes. It says, write a short, well structured document explaining XYZ topic for a general audience, focusing on the key concept and practical takeaways. Now, there are a number of things that have changed in this prompt. For example, some of the things that have changed is the audience, maybe some of the structure of that prompt, the outcome. It still doesn't have like a persona, so I'm not telling it if has a particular persona to itself. And there's no like evaluation constraints, but just comparing like, hey, write a document about whatever topic, and then actually giving that little bit longer one, like say, hey, this is for a general audience. The LLM now is like learning, like, hey, this is who I need to actually target this writing to. If I were to change that general audience to a professional audience or doctors or something like that, it's going to change how the LLM responds. So giving it a little bit more context is going to help guide it along more. Alan, what about like that snowboarding example here where we asked it to help us give us some like clothes that don't make us sweaty? What would you change there?
Yeah. So, I mean, the original question was, what is the best material to keep you warm yet not sweaty while snowboarding? But a good example of a functional prompt would be, what materials are the best for staying warm while snowboarding without overheating? Please explain why they work and compare at least three common options and compare typical affordability. So, what's changing there? We have
Mhm.
a classification of conditions now. We want to know
Maybe
what's going. Yeah, the
some
pricing we're
comparisons.
talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. We're comparing different products, which is something we're gonna do no matter what when we go to Google and we look at different options. The LLM can assist there, and an explanation request. So, LLM might do this a couple different ways. It might just pull information from the description of a product. It might go to Reddit or
Yeah.
any one of these review sites and just pull like, hey, people are saying like XYZ about this product. But the first question, you weren't getting any of those results. You're just asking what material keeps you warm and not sweaty while snowboarding. Might give you a few options,
Yeah.
but you're not going to get the context that a buyer would look for when you actually go to purchase a product like this.
Yeah, exactly. I like how when I submit a question that's more functional like this, especially when I'm giving comparisons and hey, tell me about the affordability. Like you said, a lot of the LLMs like ChatGPT will go research online and find those Reddit links, which is cool. And it'll like provide like a little source link that you can look at there and you're like, oh, cool. And you'll
I
end up
always
on it.
click those. Yeah,
Yeah,
and by the way, it's important to do that. This is a good call out. Whenever you're working with an LLM and it sources something for you, I would not take it for face value. Click the
absolutely.
link.
100%.
Especially if you're working on a research project or something for work, make sure you click that link and try to find where it pulled that content from.
Hmm.
A lot of the times they're dead links. They just link to sites. They may link to a extension or part of the web page that just no longer exists, and it might just be picking it up in its metadata.
Yep.
So you might be talking to somebody that's like if you were to take this information into a meeting, you might be talking about something that's just completely outdated or no longer relevant. Yeah, so good practice there. Another good example, by the way, of a functional prompt is something as simple like, all right, my foot hurts. Here's the basic prompt. My foot hurts on the bottom near the heel. Like, how do I fix it?
Yeah.
A functional prompt example would be, I have some pain in the bottom of my foot near the heel. What are some common causes and what are general steps that I could take to relieve it? And when should I seek medical care? There's three questions in there. Now it's reframed as causes, and I'm asking for actions on how to fix it. That'll give you a much better result from the LM. In general, I think what we're trying to get across with the use of a functional prompt, you have to learn how to ask the right questions
Yes.
to an LLM.
Right there.
Yeah, point blank, it's the single biggest value to you as a user of an LLM is learning how to ask the right questions.
Absolutely. I think that's important. And that's something that I forgot to touch on early on that I wanted to. And I'm glad you reminded me through that comment. One thing that I've learned, and I'm interested to hear your take on this. One thing that I've learned after diving deep into prompts, which we'll get into some more advanced ones here very soon, is that I have had an interesting side effect in my life from that. And what that is I have actually seen my human communication improve drastically because no longer am I leaving a lot of ambiguity in my conversations. I find myself providing more detail and context to phone calls. Maybe I'm talking to someone at my house, my kids, whatever. I just feel like I'm being a lot more thorough in my communications. Have you noticed that about yourself as well, or no?
Yeah, I mean, that probably has come as a result of a lot of different things. I'm way more conscious of the questions that I ask when I talk to people. It helped me, I would say honestly, and I'm not just being agreeable here. I think I've learned how to better communicate my thoughts and be a little bit more aware of the questions or how I sound when I'm talking to somebody
Yeah.
else.
I completely
Yeah.
agree. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. So let's go ahead and hop into these software examples that I had before. So I'm going to take those same exact software examples where I had the Python function, I had the Cloudflare DNS, and I had explain this code to me. How would I improve those? And so I'm just going to give you a quick examples. Then we can hop into these advanced ones where I think you're really going to find a lot of value. So for the Python function, I just said, hey, create me a Python function that parses a CSV file. Okay, common stuff. Millions of developers have typed this into Google and ChatGPT. But that's probably not all I needed to do as a developer. I need that CSV file parsed for a reason. So I need to think a little bit more of the context, what I need to be done, etc. And so what I can do is I can change that to be something like this. I could say, hey, create a Python function that accepts a CSV file as a file path and returns the data as a list of dictionaries. Assume the first row contains the headers and ignore invalid rows and return them as part of a tuple in the result. Don't worry if you don't know what a tuple is or anything like that. But this is just much more detailed because it's providing like a defined input and a defined output. I'm removing a bunch of ambiguity inside of the prompt. And even though there's no frameworks or testing in there, it has a lot more structure to it. Let's dive right into the Cloudflare one here. Tell me how to configure DNS so I can use Cloudflare. I would turn this one into something like this. I'd say, explain the steps required to configure DNS for a domain using Cloudflare, including what records typically need to be updated and why. Give me step-by-step directions. Now, I have asked for step orientation here. So I've asked it for a step-by-step instruction so I can kind of follow along like a manual. I've put in the reasons why I need to do these certain things because I'm configuring the DNS and I want, Cloudflare. I need to, tell me why it needs to be updated and why. What's an A record, a C name record? Again, technical details, but if you're doing something, you want to understand why it's done. It's still at this point not a fully engineered out prompt because it's kind of vendor neutral, meaning I didn't specify, is it Namecheap? Is it GoDaddy? Like where did I buy my domain? I didn't put any of that in there, but it's still much more useful than just, hey, tell me how to configure my DNS. That could give me 12 different answers that are wrong because I'm using maybe some weird off the wall domain provider. And last one here, we have some code explanation. So I might say like, hey, explain this code to me and drop in a function or something like that. And it would reply back to me. I could change this to be much more helpful in a situation like this. I would say, explain this code to what this code does at a high level. Then I want you to walk through the main sections line by line, focusing on the intent rather than the syntax. Explain it line by line. A couple of things here. You heard me say line by line twice. Sometimes when you do this, you're putting an emphasis on what you want. The LLM will pick up on that sentiment and be like, oh, they have said this twice. This must be really important. Sometimes you can also say, hey, this is critical that you do this component or focus on this component. So what this does, it's get the explanation depth is specified. I want to know line by line what it does. I just don't want to know what the function does. Tell me why this piece of code does something here and what it's doing. Maybe I don't understand that thing that it's doing, which happens a lot. The structure is kind of implied that it's going to be line by line, and I don't want to know about the syntax because I can read the syntax. Just tell me what it is. And the audience sentiment is included because since I've said, hey, at a high level and line by line, it's kind of insinuating that I kind of want a beginner level syntax. I could make it better by saying, hey, I'm a beginner, explain it to me like a beginner. But overall, this is a much more functional prompt. It probably take you 5, 10 more seconds to write, if that. If you're typing fast, maybe a few seconds, but it's just going to give you a better result at the end of the day. So here we went from simple to functional. What we're saying is it's basically going to drastically change the results on what you get. So a couple closing thoughts on the functional prompts before we move on to the real good stuff, which is where I think you'll get at least I enjoy writing the prompts the best, and that's the engineered ones. A functional prompt what is it? It's really just a prompt that's simple yet conversational, but adds a lot of clarity around maybe some of the intent, the scope of it, and what you're looking for. What are the outputs? Is it a document? Is it a markdown file? Is it some code? Is it an explanation? What it does is it reduce the ambiguity without turning the prompt into like a fully engineered prompt, which is what we're going to be talking about next. And that's the key here because you want to provide a little bit of structure here and maybe you don't care that it's perfect, but at least it's going to kind of give you the right direction in what you're moving in.
That's excellent.
Okay, so let's go ahead and hop now into engineered prompts. Alan, you have surprised me in many ways during your learnings of LLMs. And one of the things that surprised me is I actually saw some prompts that you had created. And I realized I'm like, wow, these are actually quite well engineered prompts. So to me, it seems like you've moved beyond functional prompts into more engineered prompts. Is that correct? Or how did you move from like this simple to more advanced level? And what do some of those kind of look like?
Yeah. So one of the things I did was I actually created a persona to help me engineer prompts. And by persona, I mean I created a actual prompt that acts as somebody who's a professional prompt engineer. It has a set of instructions. It lives right now. I have it in Claude. I have it in Gemini set up as a project. And I'll go in there and I'll say, all right, this is the type of person that I need to work with. These are the typical projects that I'm going to ask this person about. This is how I like to work with a collaborator. And this is the set of results that I expect.
Mm-hmm.
And so what that prompt will do is actually generate a set of instructions that I can again take into a new project and just collaborate and work with it. And it's completely changed the way that I am working with LLMs right now on larger projects. And we can get into exactly what some of those look like, but maybe we want to talk first about the principles of like engineering prompts and exactly how
they're all set up. Yeah,
how they're all
exactly.
set up. Yeah.
It is. I'm always impressed like how fast you've migrated into these new formats. And I've seen that prompt you're talking about. So I have a very similar one, which we'll get to and I'll share as well. And we'll share yours in the show notes so people can have access to them and check them out. And again, depends on what you like to do and how it works for you. You might like Alan's prompt engineer better. You might like mine better. Try them both, see what works, and then come up with your own. But yes, let's get to the kind of the core concepts of like what a good engineered prompt is. The good engineered prompt is going to be very purpose built. It's very specific. It's not like an open-ended chat. You're kind of providing a lot of details. It's laser focused in what it's doing, and it provides a persona. Now, I want to explain the persona for a second because it's very important. Think of an LLM as like the most intelligent thing in the world. And then if I can ask it any question, history, I can ask it about Da Vinci, I can ask about physics, medical things, legal things. The wealth of knowledge is amazing. That is a positive and and a negative. Because if I am not very laser focused on what I want and I do not include a persona, LLMs operate on the principle of pattern recognition, really, very much like humans' brains do. And so if I ask it a question, it might kind of go off in left field and assume I want a legal response, or it might assume that I want a medical response or whatever for whatever reason because of how I structured it. But if I give a LLM like a persona and I laser focus it, kind of think of like this LLM is huge. I've basically sliced away everything else. I've told the LLM it doesn't care about legal, it doesn't care about medical, it doesn't care about this. If I said, hey, you are a Python engineer who is an expert in web development and REST APIs. It's not worried about anything else, not worrying about machine learning. It's not worried about anything else. It's not worried about being a history teacher. It now just knows this is where I'm going to focus it. So I've now laser focused. It's where it's going to be making his decisions and recommendations from. Another couple of things that a engineered prompt also includes is kind of explicit constraints about boundaries about what's going to happen or what it should or shouldn't do. It's going to contain also a lot of strong context about the awareness of like what the task is, maybe additional information that it has. The task itself is going to be very well defined. It might be just a couple sentences. You might also have one that is 1,000 words long. I have prompts that are over 2,000 words long, basically execute as an autonomous agents because of I've followed a lot of these principles here. And eventually what you'll want to build into these prompts, which you'll see is one of the biggest things, is like some type of evaluation criteria. This is how an LLM can check what it's doing. If it's writing software, maybe you tell it to write tests, or that it can actually read the screen and see that things are where they should be. If you are having it develop a video or an image, maybe it's got to constrain to certain properties and it needs to check that the resolution is what you want it to be. So there's all different types of evaluation criteria you can sit inside of there. Tests could be whatever. There's also terminal events that you should throw inside of these. And again, I know I'm throwing a lot at you here, but we'll get back to some examples here. So terminal events could be, hey, stop doing something when X happens. Or if you find yourself running down some crazy path too many times and you can't fix it, then stop and let me know. Or if it's a success, let me know. The self-checking is built in, like I said, through evaluation. And ultimately what it's doing is it's providing you with reliable results. Found is that when you structure a prompt with these different ways, which I will give you an acronym here later and examples, you can then develop prompts that are insanely good for agentic coding, self-reflective learning, idea exploration, problem troubleshooting, even just like psychological things. If you're working through and you want questions and you want to do introspection, it's amazing at what you can do. Blows my mind. I remember a very specific point in time in July of last year where I was doing something at work and it was very tedious, slow. And what I did is I said, well, let me take about an hour and try to write a prompt. And if it doesn't work, okay, I lost an hour. What I ended up doing was writing a prompt that was like 1,800 words long. I just kind of brain dumped it. And it turned into almost like a document I could hand to an employee and say, hey, coworker, can you go do this work? They should be able to follow that document and get it done. I then just told the LM, I gave it a persona. I said, hey, you are an expert Android engineer and here's your task. And then I said, hey, when you start, ask me, what part of the system to start in. And I fired it off. It did in 12 minutes of work what takes me about 3 to 4 hours to do. And that was that day. I really remember I stood up at my desk at my co-working place and I got up and I walked outside and I went for a walk because that's the day that I realized everything had changed.
Wow. Yeah, they're so efficient. And with a good set of instructions, it could just it's capable of anything. I have a couple of different prompts that I'm using right now. One that helps me to create social media posts. I'm terrible at social media. I really am. And outside of this podcast, this is really like my first true presence on any sort of social platform in several years, other than I have a private Instagram with my family and friends. But
You use that all the time to help you generate posts or what?
yeah, so it has a set of instructions and I explained to the prompt. So first off, the prompt is set up to be an expert social media persona.
Mhm.
I let it give itself a name. It's pretty funny. It is constantly scanning the algorithms on all the major social media platforms. So when I come to it and say, "Hey, I want to develop a post for X. Here's the concept for the post." Look through. It'll look through X and it'll say, "All right, here's what's trending. Here's what's working right now." It'll actually source all of that to make sure that it's not hallucinating or telling me something that's not true. I'll feed it a line of text. It'll say, "Hey, Alan, this is way too long. I think it would be better to go from this angle." and I'm okay with it. I trust it way more than I trust myself with this stuff. And also for me personally, kind of have a fear of sharing things on social media.
Mhm.
I'm the type of person that'll sit on X and type out a response and just back it out like 5, 6 times and then just walk away and say like, all right, fuck, I don't really want to post this.
I've been there. Oh yeah.
But it understands because I told it my fear of posting on social media. I gave it that background and it'll actually,
Call you on it.
yeah, no, I'll say like, I don't know if I want to post this. I'd be like, it could be like reasons why I should post it and not be afraid to post it, like, but that's what I need, that's why
Yeah.
it's a helpful collaborator. That's just one example of a prompt like this that I set up. But anyway, I remember you had told me a story that you used to explain about plumbing. What was that story again with regards to
Yeah,
prompts?
the plumbing story, that's, I use that to explain kinda how help change people's mental models. But before I get started into that, I know exactly what you mean. Last night, I was doing the dishes, and I thought to myself, I was watching a YouTube video of somebody, and I was like, "Why am I" like, the person on the YouTube video said, "Why are you watching my video? What are you getting out of this?" And I'm like, "Whoa, that is pretty deep." I'm like, "Why am I watching this video?" I'm like, "What am I getting out of this?" And, like, there's an older gentleman in his 50s. I'm like, wow, why do I like this guy's channel? What's going on? I'm like, I was really dumbfounded. And I fired up ChatGPT, gave it a long prompt, which like kind of in this persona format and everything we'll talk about. And for the next 25 minutes, I had a conversation with ChatGPT identifying the core reasons why I like this. And what it came down to was like some internal fears or insecurities that I had that this person gave me hope on. And I'm just like, oh my God, this is crazy.
Yeah, they're great for that. It's kind of funny. Tesla built in Grok into the car.
Oh, they did?
You can just activate Grok and talk to it. And Grok's an amazing model. It's an amazing voice model as well. Though I think my favorite thing about it is that it has access to live data
Yeah.
on X and through news. So you can talk to it about anything from like current events to, your favorite celebrities or, the Oscar nominations that just came out this week. It has all that information. But there's a couple different modes, and one of the modes is called therapist.
Really? I didn't know
Yeah.
this.
So you could just be sitting there in the car and, driving back and forth wherever you gotta go, and you can talk to it and have open conversations about whatever
Damn,
it is that you're thinking. It's that I know this is a quick aside from the conversation that we're having, but just so that you know this is available,
that's
you know,
awesome.
gr yeah, it's just for anyone who's listening, you don't have to have a Tesla to talk to Grok. You can go to grok.com and do it yourself, or download the app on your
Yeah.
phone. But it's yeah, this is really what it's all about. It's not just about asking silly questions. These models have access to all the information that's almost all the information that's available through the web and can give you really helpful tips and tricks or help walk you through apprehensions or fears or anxieties that you're having. And it sounds like, Don, you're doing it too, and I'm doing it too. It's the first time actually talking about it with anybody, so it's nice to hear that anyone's actually using it. Obviously, other people are using it because they have that feature on the app. But
Mhm.
yeah, it's a really incredible way to interact with an LLM.
That's I didn't know that was in the car by default and it had the therapist mode. That's pretty cool. But like underpinning all of this is exactly what we're talking about is actually underpinning that prompt or that therapist mode is actually a very well-tuned engineered prompt. So I'll go ahead and hop into like the plumbing story. And the goal of this is to help you change your mind about how to interact with an LLM. And the story goes like this. Assume that you have a house and your house, you have a water leak in your house. And so what do you need to do? You need to call a plumber. And so what you end up doing is thankfully you can just text a plumber. Think of the LLM as somebody you can text who you need for help. And you say, hey, I need a plumber to come over and fix a water leak. And then boom, 20 minutes later, a plumber shows up at your door and you answer the door and the plumber says, hey, I'm here to fix a leak. And you're like, yeah, come in and fix the leak. So the plumber comes in, starts looking in your coat closet, starts looking in the garage, and you're like, whoa, 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 whoa. No, the leak's in the bathroom. Plumber goes into the bathroom, to the guest bathroom, looking around there, looking in the shower. You're like, no, 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 no. The leak is in the master bathroom. And so the plumber starts looking around and trying to find where the master bathroom's at. And you're like, okay, it's at the end of the house. Turn right, go down the hallway. Master bathroom's over there. So it finds the master bathroom. It's like, all right, cool. I got it. Goes into your master bathroom. It's looking in the shower, looking by the toilet. And you're like, okay, what is this dude's problem? You're like, the leak. It's over in the sink. I need you to take a look at fix the leak over at the sink. Plumber says, hey, no problem. I got it. Goes over to the sink and starts looking at the sink. And then you realize I'm in a master bathroom and I've got two sinks. Okay. It's actually on the right hand side. So it goes on the right hand side. It's looking finally after you tell it. And then it's like looking at the top. You're like, okay, the leak is, it's in the master bathroom. It's on this right hand sink. It's underneath the sink and it's leaking where the pipe connects. And it goes, oh, okay. So now it goes directly to where it's leaking and starts looking at it, says, "Hey, I can fix this. I'm good." 5 minutes later, comes back later and said, the plumber's like, "All right, cool. I got you. You're all done. You're good to go." You go take a look at it and you look and it's all duct taped up. It's got a bunch of duct tape on it. You're like, "What is this?" And you're like, "It was fixed." You're like, "The leak's fixed. It doesn't leak anymore." And you're like, "No, don't do that. Like, use actual pipe fittings." And it's like, "Oh, okay, yeah, I'll use pipe fittings." And now the LLM goes in or whatever, your plumber goes in and fixes it and uses pipe fittings. You look underneath there and you're just like, "No, I have chrome pipe fittings. Why are you using like bright pink pipe fittings? Like, what are you doing? Like, that doesn't match." And so then you have to be more clarification. You have to give the LLM like, "Hey, you're telling it where the leak is. You're telling it how to fix things. You're telling it, hey, I want you to fix and use the same material that you're using before, you know?" And then all of a sudden it does that. It says, "Oh, no problem. I'll fix that." And it says it's done. You look, it looks great. You're like, "Perfect. Thank you very much." You turn on the water and you realize it's leaking all over still. And you're like, "You didn't fix the leak." And it goes, "You're absolutely right. I didn't check it." Like if you've worked with LLMs, like you've noticed, like it's always saying like, "You're absolutely right." Like, especially with Claude.
with a couple of emojis.
Yeah, exactly. So what you failed to give it here is like an evaluation metric. How can it check its own work? Well, I
Yeah.
need to tell the plumber, and I shouldn't have to, but sometimes we do. Make sure you turn on the water, especially the hot water. For whatever reason, it leaks more with hot water. So finally, the plumber's like, "Oh, right, it still leaks. I forgot to tighten it up." And then goes down there, fixes it. Finally, it's all tightened up, etc. And then finally, and this is like a different scenario, you might run into a scenario where all of a sudden the plumber can't fix a leak and can't figure out what's going on. The leak's actually coming from the wall. It's in the wall. So if you don't tell a plumber what you want to do, you just said, "Hey, I fix it at all costs." The plumber rips out your sinks. It's ripping it. He's digging into the walls, tearing the sheetrock down. He's finally fixing the leak. You're like, "Why did you tear my wall apart?" And you're like, "Well, you told me to fix it at all costs. So I did."
Yeah.
And so the LLM will do something similar. It'll just start deleting files. It'll just start doing whatever you want it to do in a coding scenario. And so what I'm really getting at here is I have to give it some terminal events saying, "Hey, if you fix the leak, you can fix it. Cool, you're done. Tell me that you're done. Make sure you've checked the water. Make sure you've turned it on. Make sure there's no leaks." And also, if you get to the point where the leak goes into the wall or it needs a deeper fix, like it's not a simple fix, I need you to stop and let me know. That is like a terminal event. So the end result of this story here is if we just tell the plumber to come in and fix a leak, we would never do that in the real world. The plumber's going to come to our door. We're likely going to guide the plumber to the exact location where the leak is, tell them what's happening, tell them how to repeat the issue, tell them how we would like it fixed, and then tell them, "Hey, don't you spend a bunch of money. I don't want to be digging into the wall. Let me know if you have any problems." Think about communicating with an LLM the very similar way. You're going to give it a persona. That's the plumber. You're going to give it a task. It's going to fix a leak. You're going to give it context. Where is that leak? The physical location, the specificity of where it is exactly. You're going to give it constraints like, "Hey, don't use Flexiseal. Don't use duct tape, or just use only matching materials that are already using." You're going to give it evaluation metrics. "Hey, here's how you check if you did the job correctly." You're going to turn the water on, ensure there's no leaks. If there is leak, continually fix it, repeat it and fix it. And then you're going to give it terminal events. "Hey, you're done when the leak is fixed and you've verified it. And if leak can't be fixed because you got to go into the wall or do something crazy, then you stop." If you follow this same exact methodology of prompting, which is exactly how I do things, the results that you will get will be life-changing from working with prompts. And this follows a very basic formula here. And that formula here, and I'm interested to hear if you follow a similar or if you just kind of identified it just through trial and error. I identified this as a persona, a task, a context, constraints, evaluation, and terminal events. Now, not all of them are required. Maybe you only need a handful of them and use them as necessary. But when I follow this pattern, which we'll include inside of the show notes and also in the transcript, the results you'll get are amazing. Alan, when you did this and you kind of started building your own prompts, did you find like an existing pattern you followed, or did you just kind of figure it out through trial and error?
For me, I figured it out through trial and error. This is, by the way, the example you provided is great. And there's so many reasons why structuring a prompt that way is valuable to you, valuable to your usage of the LLM. And high level, we won't get into it today, but context window is absorbed so much quicker if you don't give it concise instructions. In the same way that if you told a plumber, "Fix the leak in my house," and he just came into your house and looked for a leak, he would charge you by the hour, right? Until he found the
Yeah.
leak. The LLM's going to do the same thing. It's going to probably find the first leak in your house. It might not be the first one that you had in mind. It might be one that you didn't know it was there. It's going to fix it. It's going to tell you it's done. You're going to go and look and see if the leak was fixed, and it's not going to have been fixed. You're going to be like, "Well, I fixed it. By the way, it was this." And you didn't get the end result that you wanted. So for me, again, this kind of goes back to what I was mentioning earlier about working with LLMs to get to really customize the way that you want to work with them. I figured it out through trial and error, and I can think back to a prompt I was using for career search and helping me to write resumes. And so I would put in a job description, and I would have the LLM act as a hiring manager, help me to draw parallels between my experience based on a set of documents that I would provide to the chat, and draw parallels to like the job description. And then at the end of helping me to work through line by line of my resume, then I would have it shift to the cover letter. And after we're done with the cover letter, I would shift personalities. So it was actually a
Yeah.
context, like a persona shift in the middle of my prompt. So once we're done working through the paperwork, basically to apply to a job, now it's going to be my career coach in helping me to interview for the job. So my whole point of explaining this is that this wasn't something that was like an off the shelf thing that I found. Now it could be now it's you if you want. We can share this prompt in the description. That's just how I prefer to work with the LLM. That was for this specific example, and then for building apps, it's completely different. But
That's amazing that you kind of came up with that on your own. And like I saw that prompt. We'll share it in the show notes because those type of things can be super useful. And I've used it for very similar like interview like scenarios. It could be for, jobs, could be whatever. Super useful. What I wanted to share with folks here before we get into the meta prompting stuff and wrap it up is we do have a couple of good examples here that you can use. But just one quick reminder, when you are writing your prompts, try to use this persona, task, context, constraints evaluation. Think about it in your head like, hey, you are a Ruby on Rails engineer and you're going to be developing blah, blah, blah. Give it that type of context and all those things. In the show notes, there'll be two prompts that you can see. One is a software engineering prompt for Ruby on Rails application, and another is a video prompt. I'm not going to read the full prompt, but I'm just going to give you a little bit of an idea here, reading the persona and the beginning of the task of both. So the first one here is like, I have a Ruby on Rails application. I need to generate open graph images. These images are the ones that you would have when you share a post on the internet, on Discord or through text message or whatever. You get that little preview of like the image that shows up. Those are generated behind the scenes usually. Or there's just one simple one for the whole site. But if you want to make things really cool, you can have one generated per. So you got a blog, it'd be a blog post. So this is the prompt. It'd be an open graph image generation feature. The persona is you're an experienced Ruby on Rails developer tasked with implementing a production ready feature. You write clean and well-tested code following Rails conventions and best practices. You consider edge cases, performance implications, and maintainability in your implementation decisions. Task is build an automated open graph image generation system for the post model in a Ruby on Rails application. The post model being like a post in a blog post. The system must generate open graph images, trigger regeneration when the post changes, store generated images, and the list goes on. We're probably only covering 20% of the prompt at this point. It continues to go on. You can see the full prompt inside of the show notes. It's got context. It's got constraints about when to do things, testing, evaluation criteria, how to handle image validity, how to write tests, how to manage background job processing, terminal events. So great example of how you can like structure a prompt where it'll just go do amazing things. The second one that we have here is a fitness video generation prompt. So maybe you want to generate a video using one of the video tools and you want a high energy like fitness cinematic video. It would go something like this. The persona would be you're an elite cinematographer specializing in high energy sports and fitness content with the expertise in creating motivational visual experiences reminiscent of Nike commercials, Under Armour campaigns, and boxing film training montages like Rocky or Creed. Your task is to generate a cinematic fitness montage video featuring intense weightlifting, functional movement patterns, and high intensity exercise. The video should be evoke motivation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Again, there's context, there's constraints that would be the resolution is 1080p. The frame rate is 24 frames per second. The cut frequency is 1.5 to 3 seconds, which is when the scenes change. Color grading. You can provide all this as constraints and it'll have some evaluation criteria. These are just really good examples of kind of just to really, now that you understand the kind of like persona, task, context, format, you can see them in action and then you can kind of help adapt what you're doing day to day to kind of start creating your own prompts that work that way. Okay, so that wraps it up for the engineered prompts. If you stop this episode right here and you just use what you just learned, you will forever change the way that you operate with LLMs. You'll get higher quality results guaranteed. But there is one additional kind of like bonus material, almost like secret level to this, which when you unlock it, it really improves a lot of prompting here. And that is the meta prompt engineering. And this is where you're going to use the agent to help refine your handwritten prompt to turn it into something that's like truly agentic. And Alan, you talked about this earlier in the show about a prompt like this that you have. Can you talk about it a little bit more?
Yeah, and I'm going to link this one down again in the show notes. So I created a prompt engineer to help me create my prompt. So this is what we call meta prompting, where we actually use a prompt to create a prompt. And so my
Yeah.
prompt is pretty simple. It's going to act as a professional prompt engineer. This one is the one that I'll share is specifically designed for use with Claude 4.5 Opus. It can be used with 4.5 Sonnet, and I have another one that's better geared towards using on different platforms. What I want my prompt to do is I'm gonna tell it what it is that I want to use it for, and it's going to ask me questions based on my use case. It's going to ask me 2 to 4 targeted questions covering objective, a target model that I want to use, a domain, so which industry, use case, technical level. Are there any constraints that I want for my prompt, like length, tone, compliant? Cost is a big one when we're talking about context window.
Yeah.
And is this, what is the scale of my use for this prompt? Is this a one time or is this for production? Am I going to be using this like over and over again? And again, to your point, and this is what I've started to implement in most of my prompts, is success metrics. How do I gauge success of the result from a prompt? Is it going to be a set of KPIs? Is there a rubric that we're going to use, or is it just subjective? Am I going to look at something like text and say like, I like this or I don't like it? Once it gets all that information from me, it actually goes into building the prompt. All right. And so
Is it interviewing you during this process or what? How does that
it
work?
does. Yeah. So my prompt will actually ask you those 4 to 5 questions to cover those different categories we just discussed. Once you respond to it, it's going to go into actually building the prompt.
So the quick question, clarification, when you're working with your prompt, I haven't looked at it, so I'm completely green here, which is good.
Yeah.
When you start this, forgive me if I missed it. Do I drop in my existing handwritten prompt or is it interviewing you from the beginning?
It's not going to interview you from the beginning. You're going to have to give it a prompt to say, all right, I want to create a prompt today that is an engineer. It's going to help me build my next app. The
Okay,
app is
so
going to be
you need to kind of seed it with something.
exactly. Yeah. And so once it gets that little bit of information from you, it's going to probe and it's going to
There's a
ask
start,
you more
interviewing.
important information so that it knows how to structure the prompt that it's going to build.
Okay. Yeah, so
Right.
sorry to interrupt. You had talked about how it was now going to be going through the steps, right?
Exactly. So once it goes into building the prompt, it's going to assign a role and context. It's going to assign instructions. It's going to structure how it inputs. So basically the expected format, the variations, and how to handle missing data. It's going to structure the output format, so a precise structure
Yeah.
with a template or schema. It's going to look at edge cases as well. Edge casing in
Yeah.
developing apps super important. So it's all built in. Anyway, moving on, it'll apply the following techniques. It has XML tags. So yeah, XML tags are, I would say, a standard now for probably prompting with Claude.
Can you explain a little bit about the XML tags for maybe some of the people that don't know? Like, is it like, are you putting the XML tags as part of the formatting or is it kind of separating different chunks of the prompt or what is it?
It's separating different chunks of the prompt. So it's setting up instructions, examples, constraints,
Okay. So
context.
those are the different XML tags or whatever, instructions, example, constraints, whatever.
Exactly. To
Got
organize the more complex prompts.
it. Okay, cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's going to take all that information. It's going to clean it up into a nice structured prompt.
Mhm.
And then, I've gotten prompts before. I just plug them into a project. I test them to see if I like the way it works. If I see that it's not operating the way I want it to work, I'll take the prompt back and I'll say, hey, listen, I didn't like the way that it does this. I'd like to change it. Can you make some recommendations?
Yeah.
Well, I'll ask me like, hey, here's what I think we can do. Do you want to implement it? Say yes or no. And it'll spit out a new, usually I ask it to give me the prompt in Markdown so I could just copy paste the
Yeah.
actual full prompt right out of the window. And then I put it in the instructions and
Keep
it
iterating.
moving.
Huh?
Yeah. Keep iterating.
Yeah, I think that's something I have put down in here in our notes. I wanted to make sure that folks knew about is it you're going to get the finalized prompt out of a result like this. It might get you 90% there. It might be 99% there, but you're going to probably need to optimize and iterate on it. I've written prompts that were 2,000 words long to help automate insane parts of my software engineering career. But what I always realize is it'll be executing, and then all of a sudden I'll think, oh, I totally forgot this really random edge case that I need to throw in. I'll stop the execution, go back in, do exactly what Alan just said, and say, hey, I need to add this little new constraint, this new little piece of information. Please update the prompt to reflect that. And the good news is sometimes if those prompts are like numbered, like, here's 8 steps you got to accomplish, and you realize step 6 needs to be something different, or there needs to be a new step in there, it'll actually put that step in step 5 and then renumber everything else. It actually saves you a bunch of time, but of course that's AI.
Yeah.
All that to say, Alan's is probably way more, from what I'm hearing, is way more advanced than mine. I have a link that I'll put in the show notes next to Alan's. Mine is a much more simpler agentic prompt builder. It just asks you to reformat. Very similar thing, gives it a persona that you're a meta prompting expert, and asks it to reformat it to a persona, task, context, constraints, evaluation, terminal conditions. There's just a couple of notes. And I do use a couple XML tags like you do for just formatting and like grouping purposes, because the agent seems to understand that quite well. And I fire it off. Ooh, if I were a listener of this show, and I am as I speak it at the same time, I would experiment with both, see which one works better for you. I have a feeling Alan's is probably going to be a lot more advanced. And actually, I'm going to try it out. But just realize that nothing is perfect. You're just going to have to play with it. And again, we're talking about the bonus level here. We're talking about meta prompting. If you're just doing a formatted prompt that's engineered, your results are going to be amazing already. This is taking that amazing prompt that you've already written by hand and just really polishing it to make it just really pop. And this is where the amazing things are going to happen. You're going to see some great stuff out there. So there's that. And then there's, you can use these types of prompts for all different types of things,
Yeah. One of the things that I did with that prompt was Anthropic had actually released a build with Claude prompt engineering guide.
Yeah, they did.
And so when I went to go create that prompt, I fed it the link and said, hey, help me create a prompt engineering prompt that utilizes all the best guidance or the instructions from this guide.
Mm-hmm.
Most of what's in that prompt is a result of
that guide.
Claude looking through that document and saying, all right, let's introduce these best practices.
Yeah. It's, we've talked a long time today about prompts. We started with very simple examples of, just simple few words, a sentence prompting that we've all done. We went into like adding some additional details and clarifications to that to make it functional. We ended with really engineering your prompt with these constraints and kind of these components. And if you fill out these components, your results are not going to just get like a little bit better. They will be immensely better. And one last little tip here that I forgot to mention is that when you're building your prompts, and this could go for any type of them, simple, functional, engineered, one of the tricks that I love to do, and I know you do this too, Alan, is at the end of my prompt, I will say this. I'll say, ask me clarifying questions one at a time before you begin. And then what that will do is it'll put the agent into like an inquisitive mode and ask me questions that it needs clarification on, which will just make the execution of your prompt so much better.
Yeah. That's my preferred way of working with the model as well. And you stay aligned in your goal the whole way through when you're working like that.
Well, that wraps it up for like the main part of the show. We're introducing something new here, which is, again, we are a new show anyway, but we want to kind of showcase some of the things that we're working on and where we're really using AI. So we have a little final segment here. It's just called, what we're building. And right now, which we'll talk for a few minutes. The things that I'm currently working on is I have a timer app for fitness. So if you're into any type of fitness and you need a timer app, I created a free one. It's called For Time. But I learned this term the other day. It's funny. It's called artisanal development. And so like the timer app was written back when it was artisanal code, means like written by hand. And so this got myself and another developer rewrote this like 2-3 years ago before AI was really around. And now I'm using AI with it. And just last night I added a feature to it that probably would have taken me like 3 days before. It took like an hour. So just absolutely amazing. And I'm using like that, like I said early on, like an MCP server to actually interact with I'll have an emulator running. And I recorded this. It's just the video was too long to send to you last night, Alan. The amazing thing that I did is I told it to install when it was done building, to install it on the emulator. And then I said I wanted it to go through the app and verify it worked. You've used this app too. I didn't tell it how to use the app. I didn't tell it what the buttons were. I didn't say anything to it. I just said, install it, make sure it works. It went through the onboarding wizard that has that little like introduction thing. It went
Yeah,
through it. It got through that. It found the main view. It found where the timer was. It found out how to navigate and swipe it. It did it by itself,
that's
100%.
incredible. My god,
Dude,
it's a whole QA department.
dude,
That's incredible.
it was completely mind blowing. And there's another one of those moments where I just stood up, had to go for a walk. So
It's just scary. I mean, it's awesome that you can do that. For someone like yourself who is working on these apps and just needs to get things done. You don't have to wait for all this red tape to keep a project moving. You can do it yourself.
yeah, I had to validate that way. And then I was like, you know what? Can you actually write some automated tests to do this too? And like it wrote all the tests and I verified that they were correct. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. So I did that. And I also did I have an email marketing platform that I wrote myself that, again, artisanal that is now being built with agents. And I connected a Chrome DevTools MCP to that, which allows the agent to see the web app. And so I could actually say, hey, the button is off the screen or something's too wide. Normally you take a screenshot, drop it into the chat, and you'd have to do it that way. Now it's like, okay, yeah, I loaded it up. And you can see it in Chrome. It'll say this window is being operated by a testing agent. I'm just like, what the? And it was just like
That's
operating itself. It figured out how to log into the app without me telling it to. It's like, oh, I found a login inside of your seed data. I'm gonna log in with that one. I'm like, oh my God.
God. Really? Just be careful what you put in there. Holy
Yeah. So anyway, it's been a lot of fun. For me, it's just been experimenting, learning a lot about the different agents, different tools out there, and just building features with it. I have really enjoyed hearing from you, though. Like you recently built something that's really fun for you and your friends, though. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. Well, really quickly, by the way, if you do work out, I would highly recommend checking out Don's for Time app. I use it
Yeah.
all the time. It's excellent. It's it's saved me a lot of money on going to have to buy one of those like rogue clocks or something else to monitor my EMOMs or just anything for time. So a lot of you really put every single thing into that app that anyone would use. It's such a full featured app, and it's incredible that you did it artisanally, which
Yeah.
my God, it sounds so antiquated. Like it's just so funny that like that's what we're calling traditional coding at this point. The new way that you're working with your apps to let an agent actually go in and view it and make edits is so cool because, up until this point, I've been doing the same exact thing where I'm just screenshotting all the bugs, all the visual
Yeah.
bugs, the bugs in the code and sending it into the chat. And it's saying, okay, like, let me go back and fix this. But the fact that it can have its own eyes, I mean,
It's
it's
crazy.
really just a full service agent at that point. So, um,
We'll have to do like
that's
a
gonna cut down on so much time. That's gonna allow you to build so much more. It's just, yeah, it is scary, and it's also very exciting at the same time.
yeah, I'm gonna have to. I think I'll have to show you how to get it set up for your projects because you'll be mind blown by it too. But this will probably
Yeah.
be something very useful to also maybe we'll do like we'll do a show or a live show sometimes. Just say, hey, here's how it kind of works if people can see it.
So it would be really helpful on this one project that I'm working on, where I'm putting together cards. They're just visual cards. They're generated using Nano Banana 3 or Nano Banana Pro. And I've had some issues, some visual glitches with the animations of like when a user opens a card, the card comes out the wrong way, or I don't like the way the card that opens up. So
Is this a web app or is it a mobile app or what is it?
right now it's being developed in the web, and I have hopes of making it a web app as well. It's probably about 4,000 lines of code at this point, of which, I haven't written any of it. It's insane, but it's a full functioning app. This is a concept, something that I was pretty passionate about building at one point, and it just went on the back burner because there wasn't an LLM that could really support it in the way that I wanted to build it. Nano Banana 3 is fantastic, and one of the reasons why, it signaled to me that it was time was because Nano Banana 3 will allow you to extract elements of an image, whether it's text or, physical elements of the image, and edit them. So you could say if you were to generate an image of a beach and there was a surfboard and a couple of chairs on the beach, you could say, all right, I don't want 3 chairs. I want 2 chairs. I want them to be green instead of blue. Take the surfboard out and add, a lifeguard chair.
Yeah.
So you have full control over the images that you're wanting to generate. And then also, it's way better at text. I don't know if you'd been generating images with LLMs previously, but if you were to say something as simple as like Don Felker on an
Mhm.
image, it might type like
Yeah, terrible.
DONAFLE, like some
Some
weird
random
symbols.
character.
Yeah, I just have no idea. And then if you wanted to like fix that, it would just
Forget it.
forget it. I mean, it would change the whole image. There was no way to do it. So it was just an impossible thing to do prior to this model coming out. So that's one of the projects I'm working on and I'm really excited about
What are
using
you using to
Next.js.
build it? Are you using like, I know you said Next.js just now, but like what everything is kind of new to you. So like I use all kinds of models and tools. Are you using Cursor, using Claude? What are you using?
So you had recommended using Conductor as a UI for Claude Code. And so I took this as an opportunity to learn how to use Conductor and to dive a bit more into Claude Code as well. So that's been my main. And I have to say the experience of using both has just been incredible. I do have some questions about Conductor. I find it easier to navigate the cursor interface and to make some of the changes that I wanted to make. I think Conductor, there might be some it might be as simple as just like toggling something on and off so that I could make these edits that I want to make. But yeah, I've really enjoyed using Claude Code through Conductor. On a separate project that I'm working on, I'm using Cursor. And the reason for that is just simply because I don't want to burn out my context window on Claude,
Right.
So like I'm just using I pay for the whatever it is, the $20 a month Cursor subscription, and I can use like different models to build this chat bot that I'm torturing my friends with in the group chat.
That's
But
the other project you're working on, right? That one's
yeah,
pretty
yeah.
cool.
Yeah, this is fun, this is just stuff like honestly, if I was doing it for work, I'm not sure I would be as excited as I am about doing it right now just because it's really just all passion projects. We're on this platform called GroupMe, which if you aren't familiar with, it's Microsoft's group messaging platform. And it's a great platform. It's a very simple messaging platform. We enjoy using it. It has a lot of good functionality that the group likes, and that's why we're still there. They had introduced Copilot as an AI assistant in chats, but Copilot is so sanitized and it's not very fun. And in a group chat with the boys, you want a bot that can keep up.
Just
And yeah,
you can make it like a David Goggins one where it's just like calling you out on nonsense, right?
yeah, oh yeah. I mean, you can go so far past, and some models are a little bit more liberal in allowing you to be, I guess, more NSFW and ask questions. And I think the guys are getting a kick out of it. I know they're not really enjoying me testing in the chat, but over the last couple nights, I've been able to put together some different personas for the bot to come into chat and just act out, just ridiculous.
So
One of
that
the craziest things, by the way. So one of the things I want to say is that I really enjoy building with Claude Code. I really enjoy building with Gemini. I haven't used 5.2 Codex yet, but I heard it's really good. But I really like using Grok for these personas. And the reason for that is because one, Grok allows you to have a little bit more fun with the personas that you create. There's not like there's safety barriers. You can't do anything illegal, obviously, but you could be a little bit more NSFW, which is what I think we're looking for in the group chat with the boys. And the other thing is that Grok has the ability to search real-time news, RSS, and X. So, you could ask questions about what's going on in the news right now, or you can ask questions about the weather for this weekend. And so not only is it this bot where it's hysterical or it has the potential to be hysterical, it's super helpful, dude. You know what I mean? Like
uh
it'll like you could ask it like, what are the top trending stories on X?
and it would reply in that persona that you have given it, which
And
could
it
be totally
replies
off
in the
the
persona.
unhinged.
Yep, yep, and, so it's just a lot of fun. Those are the 2 projects that I'm working on right now that I'm having a blast with, and, I have a couple of other things in the pipe, a little bit more advanced, so I'm gonna need your help. We haven't
Sounds
talked
good.
about it yet. I'm gonna hit you after the show, but, got some good ideas cooking, and yeah, I've been enjoying the out of working on some of this stuff,
That's
and
awesome.
I still like, last night to kinda land this plane, I'm sorry I've been talking about it for a long time. I didn't talk a lot during the show, so I'm making up for it now.
You're good.
I wanted the bot to also have the ability to generate images, and that's one of the abilities of the Grok model has image generation. I believe it's Imagen or Grok 2 image. I forgot the model exact
Yeah.
name, but it was for whatever reason it was just tough for me to figure out how to implement this into my code. And I was going back and forth, with I was actually working at a Gemini because that's where I had started the project. And then I just started talking to Claude in Cursor and was just able to like fix it, like resolve it so quickly. So I had to set up 2 different triggers on, it basically operates off of a webhook. When you type a note, you could say like Grok and it'll do one thing, and then you could say grok send and it'll do a different thing
Okay.
to kind of give you some perspective. So for when the group goes grok, tell me what's going on right now in the news, it'll respond with a chat, it'll respond with the news link. When you say grok send and then you type your prompt, it'll create an image. That's how I set it up.
Oh, so it'll
So,
reply in line. So it'll reply. You can have it make images and reply in line in the group chat with images.
yes. Yeah. So right now it's sending a image generation link, and they're temporary links just for maximal privacy. So basically after the webhook is triggered, it'll be read by my script, my Python script. And my
Mhm,
Python script is going to say this is a relevant trigger. It's not a relevant trigger. If it's not a relevant trigger, it just passes it by. It doesn't store anything.
mhm.
And then when it recognizes the trigger, it'll see the trigger plus everything after is the prompt. And then it'll ping, you know,
Yeah,
it'll
the
print,
API or whatever.
yeah, the API, and then it'll reply with the response.
You did this like you've never deployed anything like this before, right?
No, this is, you know what? It's funny. I was just sitting in bed. I was watching the NFC Championship game last week, and this is something that I had wanted to build. And after I'd been building all week on the Cards app, I was like feeling a little bit more comfortable and just being able to spin up a project pretty quickly. And so I said, look, I got an hour. I'm sitting here. Like, let me see if I could just get some sort of MVP out. And I think it took me all of 45 minutes to get it working, which was incredible.
That's
And then
wild.
over the last couple nights, I've just been, making little updates to it. At first, it was just a LLM that responded in a persona, which was fun enough for just like, making jokes. And then I decided I wanted it to be a little bit more helpful. I pulled in, the live data from news, RSS, and X. That was working. That was a huge win for me. And then 2 or 3 nights later, after just experimenting with some more personas and letting it, have some fun in a group, I was like, I would love if it could just like send images too. If I could tell it, to create an image and it would send a link. And this was probably the hardest piece to overcome, just because it was introducing that second element with the second trigger.
Mhm.
And there's some issues with how GroupMe will receive the link. Does it have to be stored as a GroupMe image in their source library, and then for it to show in line as an actual image? And I just said, you know what, like let's just have it sent as a link. That the temporary link is in my opinion the best way for these group chats anyway. So it just disappears, kind of like a Snapchat feed, basically.
Yeah,
Like you send a picture and it's gone. So that
that's
that's how
cool.
it functions right now.
That's awesome. Cool. Well, everybody, thank you for joining and watching, listening, wherever you're at. Thank you again. So, it's been a long one. We hope you found it useful, and we will catch you next time.
Thanks, guys.